Hi, Dave Anderson here at the Camera Company. Today we're going to talk about exposure. There are three elements that go into a good exposure. There's ISO, aperture, and shutter speed. Let's break those down for you. ISO is the sensor or the film's sensitivity to light, how fast that sensor will record light. And it's given numbers for reference, an ISO of 100, ISO 200, ISO 400, etc. If you go from ISO 100 to ISO 200, the sensor is twice as sensitive. If you go from ISO 200 to ISO 100, the sensor then is half as sensitive to light. Therefore, if you're taking pictures at night, you want to go to higher ISO settings in order to record those images in the lower light levels. The second element is aperture. That is how much light the camera lens is letting into the camera so that it can hit the sensor. And apertures are generally set up as f-stops of 4, f5.6, f8, f11. Every time you go up one full stop, you're cutting the amount of light in half. The same if you go down a stop, you're opening up and allowing twice as much light in. So for example, from f8 to f11, you're letting in half the amount of light. From f8 to f5.6, you're letting in twice the amount of light. The third part of an exposure is the shutter speed. How fast are you letting that light go through the lens and hit the sensor? Shutter speeds are in a fraction of a second generally, anywhere from 1/60th of a second, 1/250th of a second, 1/500th, and so on. Every time you go up from 1/250th to 1/500th of a second, you're letting in half the amount of light. Every time you go down from 1/500th to 1/250th of a second, you let in twice the amount of light. Okay, let's bring it together now. We have aperture, shutter speed, and ISO. Those are the three components to a good exposure. Both of these images were taken on the same day, just minutes apart. We kept the ISO constant. Both of them were shot at ISO 100. But the image on the left, we used an aperture of f11. The image on the right, aperture of f8. When we went from 11 to 8, we were letting twice as much light through the lens. So in order to keep our image the same, we had to decrease the amount of time that light hit the sensor. We did that by changing our shutter speed. We went from 1/500th of a second to 1/1000th of a second. So effectively what we did is we let in twice as much light, but only let it hit the sensor for half the amount of time. That is how you use aperture, shutter speed, and ISO to find a balance to get a perfect image. Well, there you have it, the exposure triangle. It's a balance between ISO, aperture, and shutter speed. Increase your shutter speed if you want a freeze action. Decrease your shutter speed if you want it to be a little more blurry. I hope this tip was helpful. If so, follow us on Facebook, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and we'll see you on the next video.